Hey Denchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and welcome to my special edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. This episode will be talking exclusively Monstercat, and these are a couple albums and EPs that I haven't gotten around to talking to that I really did want to do full reviews on, and actually one of these I actually was going to include in a regular Rapid Fire review. Things just worked out in a way that I thought it would be really cool to do a Monstercat special, so I got my crew neck, I've got the Monstercat poster, and without further ado, let's get started. There's only going to be 3 this week, rather than my usual 5 that I feature in Rapid Fire reviews, but I think it's going to be worth it because I'll have a little bit more to say about each individual album or EP. So we're going to start out with the newest EP from Pegboard Nerds called Pink Cloud, and this one was actually made, I have an immense amount of respect for them for doing this. It was made as a kind of breast cancer awareness EP, and all the funds actually went toward finding a cure for breast cancer, which was really powerful. They donated all of their proceeds from the month of October toward this cause, and of course I had to donate and bought this EP regardless of whether I was going to like it or not, and it ended up being pretty solid. Now this EP actually centers a little bit more around a future bass style, which was actually pretty weird to hear from the Pegboard Nerds considering they're typically into bass music. They've done a lot of trap, primarily dubstep, they've done glitch hop too, and it was really kind of odd to hear them finally getting into future bass, which a lot of Monstercat fans were totally into because that's what's big right now on the label. So we start off with the track Emoji, which has some dubstep influences but is primarily a future bass track, probably my favorite on the album, just really a happy track, and it's really cool to start finally hearing vocalists working on the Pegboard Nerds tracks. And actually every track on this album is a vocal track, which is really pretty cool for them to finally be doing that. They've been known in the past for doing things like Disconnected, and of course that had a small vocal sample. Razor Sharp, which I actually just came out with a vocal VIP for, and I feel like they're finally expanding their boundaries when it comes to adding vocalists to their music. We get Pink Cloud, the title track on the EP, which actually I wasn't too crazy about. Had a pretty cool music video, but overall I think the track, it definitely gives off a happy vibe, but I don't think it really brings anything new to the table. On the other hand, just like that with Johnny Graves, I think pulls off a little bit more of a unique twist on the sound they were trying to go with it. Using a lot of unique sampling, especially with the vocals, just kind of chopping it up and making it sound kind of really interesting for future bass, kind of expanding boundaries. Although Downhearted featuring Johnny Rose actually isn't too much of a future bass style, and rather more kind of a slow house sound, which is a sound that I've been getting into this year. Johnny Rose is actually one of my favorite vocalists. His vocals didn't mash completely well with the production on this one, but I still thought it was fairly solid. And the EP closes with the Fire in the Hole VIP called End Is Near. It's really cool to finally hear some vocals on this track and hear it finally translated from glitch hop into drum step. Just a really interesting listen overall. Like I said, go out and support the Pegboard Nerds, grab this EP for breast cancer, do whatever you want. But this one's definitely going to be worth at least your listening, and they definitely deserve your support as a group. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a solid 7, which is actually going to be one of the best ratings you'll hear today. The next one I'm going to review is Fractal's Gaia, and initially I was really excited to hear this one because Fractal is one of the actual artists that helped me get into dubstep with his track Elements. Actually was on the first Monstercat album I got, and was a melodic dubstep song, and it helped me actually kind of expand into my genres. At the time I actually labeled it my #1 pick for all of dubstep, and I was really excited to hear what he'd bring to the table because he hasn't released on Monstercat in a while, and I was just kind of pumped to see what he could do. But what we ended up getting was a pretty disappointing debut album. And honestly, I really don't think any of these tracks really stuck out as something that I'd really be like, oh wow, this one's definitely the hype track of the album. I really don't think any of these tracks kind of had that feel. Of course, there were a couple good ones, but I honestly think most of the album was pretty average to mediocre at best, especially for a producer on the level of Fractal. I found that the vocals on this one were pretty boring to lackluster at the least, especially from Danica Nadeau, who's one of my favorite vocalists. I just felt like it was completely underwhelming for such an awesome and talented girl. And I even found myself enjoying some of the ambient tunes on this more than the regular melodic dubstep tracks, or most of the tracks on this album for that matter. And honestly, this album might have been pretty good if it had come out maybe 3 years ago, because most of the sounds on this album sound like 2011, 2012 standard dubstep, EDM, electro. Honestly, I'm not looking for that in albums anymore. It's always refreshing to hear a little bit of a classic sound, but I just don't think he pulls it off in a way that sounds too interesting, and especially, like I said, on a producer level of Fractal, he should be able to push out something a little better than what this ended up being, and this is definitely my least favorite album Monstercat has pushed out. They've only been doing it the past couple of years, although I've been fairly disappointed in total, considering their first album they ever pushed out was Haywire's album last year, and that one was incredible. And this year, none of the albums that have released, there have been 3 within the last couple months, and none of them have been able to impress me near as much as that one. So I'm looking forward to Twofold Part 2, but in the meantime we're going to have to stick with albums like this, and I think a solid 4 is the best one I can give this. Like I said, pretty generic to lackluster, and although it's not a terribly hard listen to get through, I think Fractal could have done a much better job. Although better than a couple albums this year, I really don't think he did that good of a job with this one, so pretty disappointed. The last one I'm going to talk about today is one that I really wasn't expecting to come out on Monstercat, or even expecting at all, because I hadn't heard of this artist before he dropped his first single on Monstercat, No Way Back Up. This is Nigel Good's Space Cadet, and like I said, I had never seen him on Monstercat. I had never seen him before. He's apparently a big progressive house pioneer. He's actually a school teacher, and he does lots of tutorials on his music, and I love to listen to it. He kind of takes us back to this progressive house sound that used to be big, maybe when deadmau5 was kind of picking up some steam with his progressive house songs, Cascade. That kind of standard old classic style of progressive house that we've come to know and love. And a lot of this album kind of focuses on a bit of a cinematic sound. The album transitions well. In fact, it transitions so well that the tracks almost sound like they flow into the next seamlessly, and that's one of the things where this album went right, although I feel like the first 3 tracks, It Starts, This Is Forever, and An Adventure, were all kind of an intro to No Way Back Up. I didn't even like that track that much, honestly. It wasn't bad, but I don't think it was great either, and definitely not worth all the hype it got on Monstercat, just in my opinion. But yeah, the first 3 tracks really do sound like a kind of intro because they flow so well, and all kind of into the 4th track, which was the lead single. Regardless, this album does get a little boring at times, although I think it would, just like I said with Phyllis's EP, it would be good for kind of a sleepy album. I'd really like to see Nigel expand on some different sounds, and I think he does for a bit of it. Mostly I think it just progresses a little bit too much, at least with the house sound, and it does make for a good listen, don't get me wrong at all. Really digging the sound on this one, especially on tracks like Chiché, Lovesong, and Space Plus One. I think the second half of this album is very redeeming from the first half, even though I didn't really dislike a lot of the tracks. I just thought it was so freaking boring. Honestly, I think Nigel did a solid job with this debut, and I was pretty surprised because I didn't think I was going to dig it as much as I did. Kind of how I thought I was going to dig Fractals a bunch, but I didn't. So anyway, I'm going to give this one a solid 7. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of special episode where I just reviewed 3 Monstercat albums, EPs, whatever. Maybe I'll do more of these in the future, but I'd like to spend more time on Monstercat albums if I can, doing full reviews, because I really didn't want to do a rapid fire review, but with all the pressure of new albums coming out lately and how far behind I am, I felt like I really had to. So let me know what you guys think. Hopefully, if Monstercat fans are watching, you guys aren't going to freak out at my thoughts, and let me know in the description what you thought about the albums. Which Monstercat album so far this year has been your favorite? I'd have to say Varians is mine, because he definitely brought a bunch of different styles and sounds and made it unique based on what I've heard from him previously. I think he did a really good job with it, and I'd like to grab that one on CD, and maybe Nigel Good's too as well. But hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later. So, peace.